Matthew here from miniwargaming.com, and it's time for another Sit and Talk. This is the Ask Me Anything show where you ask me anything about wargaming, business, sometimes even gets personal, like politics or even religion. So if you're easily offended by the personal topics, such as politics or religion, then please just don't watch the show. There's lots of other stuff to watch, and you just want to subject yourself to that. Because I will answer the questions that are given to me, whatever they might be. Well, sometimes I might not answer them, but it's very rare that I'll just not want to answer a question. And of course, if you want your comment or question answered, make sure you leave it in the comment section below, unless you are watching this on YouTube, in which case click the link in the video description and leave your comment on our site, because I print off those because they're easier to organize, and we have plenty. I never get through all of them. Like for example, today there were 18 pages of printed comments, and I only printed 10 of them because I never get more than 10 pages done. So the way it works is you thumb up any ones that you want to be answered, and I answer the top 10 thumbed up questions, and then just random questions after that. So even if your question comes at the last page, as long as you get it in by, say, the Wednesday of the week before the Sit and Talk comes out, usually you have a good chance, or an equal chance, to get your question answered. So let's jump right into this. Jubal, or Jubble. A topic that comes up again and again in Sit and Talk is thoughts on how to improve production quality. The answer is always that there isn't enough time at the moment, something for the future. That's half true. When I say that there isn't a lot of time right now, I mean to put a week's worth of 5 people's worth of labor to make one video, to make one battle report. We're always looking to improve the quality of our videos, and we do that through many other ways, such as trying to improve our studios, making better terrain, more models, just having more of a variety of miniatures, of what we show, narrative campaigns. There's always stuff that we're trying to do to improve quality, but it's always, like I say, the question of, does it improve it enough for the amount of time that it adds? So things like getting more miniatures painted or terrain, that's nice because it's like a one-time thing and then you always have them. Or if you have a better studio, that doesn't cost any more time per video. It's more of a fixed thing. So I just wanted to point that out. There is another option. I'd be interested in whether it is a popular option by how many people thumb up this comment. You must spend a lot of capital on increasing the mini wargaming collection, particularly on getting minis painted. How about reducing the speed at which the collection is increased in size, and instead spend the money on hiring another member of staff to improve production quality? Example, better post-production, avoiding putting out videos with gaffes, separate cameramen from gamers, etc. I personally go more for production quality. What you're doing now is great, don't get me wrong. Vault member for life. P.S. You can train cats. Mine come to a whistle because we whistled every time we fed them from an early age. Okay. And P.P.S. Shout this comment as loudly as you can. Everyone in the office, come and give me a hug. Oh no! Did you guys see that? We're laughing. Did you guys know there was that comment? You reacted way too quickly.
I would wait for
it. Woo! Okay, so let's go back to your question, Jubble. That's a great idea. There's a couple little points to put out though. The amount of money we're putting into collecting and painting miniatures actually isn't a ton. It does work out. You could easily, like you said, if we stopped doing it all, yeah, we could hire another person full-time for post-production and all of that. But then we wouldn't be having new miniatures painted and all of that. So I agree and I disagree. It's always, Dave and I always talk about this. It's a hard question when we were able to invest more. It's like, what do we do next? Do we introduce a new gaming system? Do we increase the number of videos that we have? Do we whatever? We've talked like Leland, for example, being hired partly for painting. That's something we've always wanted to do, but until recently weren't able to afford to do. I've talked about hiring somebody, or at least part-time, who would be a writer for the narrative campaign. So we'd be able to sit down with them and just kind of talk about the story, and then they'd actually be the principal writer of the campaign. And then, I could still direct it or whatever. But we've talked about all sorts of different things, so it's always a hard choice, and we never know if we're making the right one, because it's life, and life always, it's impossible to truly measure. Yeah, we see right now, all I can tell you is that we're seeing an increase in Vault memberships, and that increase is increasing. So the rate of acceleration is accelerating. And so that tells us that we're doing something right, but that doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that we're doing everything right. And so just because a company is growing doesn't mean that they can get this haughty attitude that, well, what we're doing must be perfect. Because really, who knows what percentage of things that we're doing that if we just cut them out and did something completely different, we'd see that rate of acceleration improve even more. And so it's hard to know. It's really hard to know. But it is my goal, and Dave's goal as well, that as we grow, that we are able to put more and more money into each video we produce. I don't think we've reached the point yet where we're creating too many videos. There will come a point where I think the putting more money into making more videos will not create as much of an increase as putting more money into each video we create. Like for example, if I go to an extreme example, if we start making 1,000 videos a day, obviously the views are going to be so spread out that it's just not worth it. We could make a quarter of those videos and then put 4 times as much money into each video, and those quarter of the videos will probably get more views combined than 1,000 would before. Now that's an extreme example just to show that it does exist, but it's hard to know where do you cross the line from quantity to quality and at what points as well. So it's something that we're always working on, and it's not a bad idea what you gave. And to be honest, we don't have to keep increasing our collection forever. Even now, I've been noticing that when I look at our collection, I've been finding less and less gaps that need to be filled. Whereas before, the gaps were very obvious. Whenever I do narrative campaigns, I'd be like, shoot, I need another 3,000 or 4,000 points of this army so I can provide the variety. That's happening less and less. And so there will come a point where we won't need to do as many. We'll just need to kind of keep up with new stuff, or occasionally do a new Space Marine chapter or a new Forge World thing or whatever, or another game's worth of miniatures as well. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes for sure. I'm still reeling from that last part. War Boss Tough Scragga. Matt, suddenly everyone in the office gets transformed into assorted 40k races, none of which are entirely human. Yes, that means Space Marines are allowed. What does everyone get turned into? Is Justin still a servitor? Does chaos ensue? Ellipsis? Yeah, Justin will definitely still be a servitor. I don't know, what races would we be? You guys are asking me all these creative things, and you don't realize how not creative I actually am. I have to copy ideas left, right, and center. When you look at narrative campaigns, anybody who's read a lot of 40k books or a lot of background will find every influence. Or if you've watched a lot of movies or TV shows, you'll see exactly where it's like, yeah, I drew that idea from here and that idea from there. And I realize that most stories are that way, but mine are blatantly that way, just because why not? So then you ask me to do something creative like this. And I always think of people by like what armies they play. So like, well, Dave with Chaos, of course, and Steve with Necrons or Eldar, Chris with Eldar, Leland with with Sisters. Sorry, maybe Grey Knights. We'll say Grey Knights. Grey Knights. So I don't know. Everybody shout out. What would you be?
Yeah.
Dave's Chaos.
Awesome.
Steve's awesome.
Painted.
Chris is painted.
Emperor!
Ash would be the Emperor. That's.
How do I follow that up?
I know. Chris would be painted. All right, that's all you're getting. I'm sorry. Also, good choice on the bread. I like pumpernickel. What is your favorite cheese? Vault member for Dawag Joe. Favorite cheese? Well, it's interesting because it's not just the kind of cheese, it's also who makes it. Like, for example, I love cheddar cheese, but not all cheddar cheese. Like, so I'll go to the store one day and I'll just buy the store brand cheddar cheese, which is the cheap stuff, and it's really good. And then I'll buy the fancy brand and it's not as good. And then I'll go back a week later and buy the store brand and it's not as good. So it's all inconsistent. So I love cheddar cheese. I love brie. Brie is really good. I'd say that's probably up there. Parmesan, excellent. All these cheeses are really good. Or Tao. I like Tao. And now Necrons. Necrons have now joined the ranks of cheese, the ranking cheese. Fryer. Yeah, we'll just go with that. Hey Matt, have you considered having an aerial view of the game board? Maybe rig up something to hang a camera straight down to get a map-esque take on the battle. That's a great question, and I noticed a lot of people thumbed that up because people would like to see that. The actual time it would add to editing is enormous. And let me tell you why. The way we record our battle reports right now is there's obviously one guy with a camera, and we just go in, something's about to move, we take a quick shot of it moving, and then we stop, and we're about to roll dice, we take a shot of those dice. If you have an overhead cam, that's going to be rolling continuously. And so when Steve goes to edit these videos, or if you're watching this video in the future, whoever happens to be editing videos, when you edit them, all you have to basically do is take the 300 to 500 clips that have been created from that, and then click and drag them into the timeline, and they automatically all line up, and they're almost pre-edited. Then there's some cleanup you have to do, but for the most part, that's how you edit a mini wargaming battle report. That's what we've worked really hard to minimize editing time, mainly because it used to be that we had to edit our own videos, and since I just didn't like editing, I was like, how can I make this faster? The whole laziness is what is that? Laziness is something of invention, father of invention, there we go. Laziness is the father of invention. That's basically why we record them the way we do, is because I wanted to find a way that I didn't have to edit as much. So when you all of a sudden throw in just a second camera, period, you can't just click and drag all the clips in there. You have to go through and you have to splice in clips. You have to find where they match up, where they sync up, and yeah, it takes a long time. For example, if you've watched Geek and Sundry, their tabletop, that one with Will Wheaton where he plays board games, they have about, I think, 6 cameras, and they record those from those 6 cameras. They actually have a bunch of cameramen, and then they have one post-production guy who spends, I think, about 40 hours putting it all together. And I actually think that's pretty quick, considering what he's doing, when there's that many cameras and all the extra special effects that he adds. But he spends, I think it's on average, one full-time working week to make one episode of Tabletop. And so, whereas I think Steve spends on average half an hour to make one, maybe a little longer to add in time for uploading and titling and descriptions and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, it's quick. So anything like that eventually I'd love to do, you have to realize that it jumps enormously the cost. And so that's one of those things I'm talking about. Like, is it going to improve quality? Yes. But what ratio to the amount of stuff? Like, we would have to hire at least another person just to edit, to make up for all the time that it would cost just to have an overhead view. And of course, for you, you're thinking that'd be worth it. But you have to, from our point of view, the amount of money that goes into that could have gone into something else instead. So eventually, I hope to have multi-camera views, somebody else holding the camera, all that kind of stuff. Things that basically improve or increase the cost, but at the same time improve the quality. Also, while on the subject, have you thought of actually mapping out paths for narrative campaigns? Actually mapping out the planet or whatever you're fighting on, either physically or digitally, and using that as a prop to narrate the story. Maybe even showing cuts from the games while you tell it to give it a more narrative feel. It's interesting that you should ask that question because, where is it? This is the map for Las Caras. I'll try to hold it back far enough so it doesn't have any spoilers on it. And that is the map I drew for, well, sorry, I gotta stay out of the sun, for the purposes of me being able to visualize where the story happens and all of that. I would love to have somebody who does the graphic work to create a really cool map so that during, what I'd love for a story time, here's what I'd actually love for the story time, is 2 things. One, yes, have a map to show positioning of stuff, and have that look really good. And 2, have pictures from of miniatures, but in like really nice pictures, the ones that you see where they add in effects like smoke or whatever, the different coloring to make it look like you're taking a snapshot of real life rather than of miniatures, and then mix that in as I'm talking to kind of show. So you're not just looking at me for 10 minutes while I talk about it, but you're hearing me in the background while you see pictures of miniatures, kind of like Dave's 40K histories. Unfortunately, right now, once again, that comes down to a matter of time and money, but eventually I want to start doing that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a great idea, one that I'd love to do. But there, comment bashing here, so continue your comments. Also, have you thought of having 2 volunteers play each other? An example being Kevin and James come in to play you guys. Of course, let them play you guys, but bring it up that they could play each other and let you guys film. It'd be interesting to say the least. We do that actually with War Machine. The War Machine League is pretty much mostly that. There's all the different players playing against each other, sometimes against our guys as well. So we don't do that with 40K and Fantasy because we just get so many people coming in that it makes more sense for us to try to get that volume out. If we had the issue, I'll call it, the good problem of having so many volunteers wanting to come in that we couldn't actually keep up with them all, then that kind of stuff would totally make sense. The problem though is that we're just trying to get enough volunteers so we can keep up, and being in a small city away from any real population centers, it is actually a challenge to get enough volunteers. So all of a sudden doubling up volunteers, that's like half as many battle reports as we could be creating. But hopefully eventually we'll have the opposite problem where we'll have too many people coming in and we'll be able to do stuff like that. All right. Lucas, 37. Hey, Matt, gotta ask, why no beard? Everyone else have it at Mini Wargaming. It's true. Most people at Mini Wargaming do have a beard. See, there's two reasons. One, well, I guess there's one reason. I can't grow a beard. That's really what it comes down to. I got a baby face. I would be curious to actually try. There was one time where I had like a 2-week vacation and I'm like, I'm not gonna shave. I lasted a week and then it just drove me nuts and I shaved. But even after a week, there wasn't much. It just looked, I don't know. I grow hair right here and the mustache. Like there's nothing here, the rest of my face, nothing. You get like the little, you get like the really light fuzzy stuff. But if I let it grow out, I'd probably be able to grow a goatee, but it'd be one of those goatees where I'd have to let my mustache grow really long so that it could fill in where I don't grow. So I don't know, what do you call those? When it's just like that, where you have the big spaces in between and it's just like the one at the bottom. So that's really it. That's the main reason, is I just can't. And when I remember being a kid growing up, I was always embarrassed because everybody else had facial hair and I didn't. And then I became an adult and I saw how much they had to shave. And it wasn't until like last year that I started shaving every day. And before that, I could get away with like every 2 or 3 days and you wouldn't notice. So, you know, is it a blessing or a curse? Well, people who love beards would say a curse, and well, all less sensible people would say it's a blessing. All you have to do is I don't know. I got several people, actually, Dan, who used to work for us, like he could shave in the morning and he'd have a beard by 5 o'clock, and not just a 5 o'clock shadow, like he'd have a beard by 5 o'clock. So take your pick, I guess. Peep a leap. Hey Matt, how tall is everyone at Mini Wargaming in feet and inches? Past members too, if possible, such as Dan, J, etc. Thanks. I don't know. I'm 6'2"-ish. Everybody seems to think they're 6'2".
You're taller.
And Ash thinks he's 6'1". You say you know, but I know I'm 6'2", and everybody else says they're 6'2", and they're either taller or shorter than me. Okay, Steve is 6'5". Steve's 6'5". Chris, do you want to give up this personal information?
I'm 6.
He's 6?
Sure.
You sure? Leland thinks he's 6'2".
It says on my license.
That's what it says on your license. That's what it says on my license.
Yours is wrong.
Mine is wrong. So we seem to only employ 6-foot-plus people, and we don't go for the short ones. I don't. Yeah. That's part of the job requirement, but I don't mention that when people come in because I'll probably get sued for heightism or gigantism. We only hire old people too, right, Chris? Actually, it is funny that everybody here is, I think everybody here is 30 plus, which is fun. And I wonder what our demographics is going to look like in 10 years, because I'll be older. Everybody else here will be older, but we'll have hired more people, but will we continue to keep hiring like mid-20s and just kind of recycle that? Or will everybody just get older and it'll just be a bunch of grandparents doing Mini Wargaming in 20 years or 30 years? That would be kind of funny. Huh. I don't know. Don't have a comment for that other than just what I said. Ray Banana 84. Hello Matt, I'm reposting my question from last week because you encouraged us to do so. Imagine you hear a small voice asking for help. Oh boy. Whatever happened to just ask me wargaming questions? Why is everything so philosophical now? You look around and see nothing, so you keep going. You hear the voice again and turn to look, and this time you see a frog on the floor. The frog speaks and says that it knows it sounds unlikely, to say the least, but it's actually a person, an intern to a mad scientist, to be precise, trapped in a frog form due to a failed, extremely high-level technological experiment. High enough level to be indistinguishable from magic. Okay, glad you made that point. After describing a situation, the frog seems a little embarrassed, which is not easy for amphibians, but finally proceeds to ask a favor of you. There's a way to change it back, but it involves human saliva and certain tissues. Okay, where is this going? Neither of you needs to be into it, nor is it a Disney thing, such as a true love's first kiss or anything, but still basically the frog is asking you to kiss it to turn it back into a human. Okay, just a kiss. I wasn't sure where you were going with that. The frog then hastily explains that though is just an unpaid intern, it comes from a wealthy family and is willing to finance mini wargaming with large sums of money, or if you prefer, donate to a charity of your choice in return for help. They don't serve frogs in banks, so couldn't really pay in advance or anything. Do you refuse and turn your back on the mysterious amphibian, or kiss it and take the risk of being the guy who made out with a frog during a gas leak? What? Oh, psychedelic Fridays. Obviously, I'd kiss it. I don't see why there's any problem with that. It seems like you're setting this up like there would be some huge moral dilemma. But you yourself said it's not. It doesn't have to be a true love's first kiss or anything. So yeah, sure, I'll kiss a frog. It's just for the possibility of it turning into somebody who can give me lots of money. Done. I know you're probably like waiting for me to have this huge debate as to why I would or would not, but it's pretty straightforward. I'd kiss the frog. MM Despot. Hi Matt, thanks to you and all the Mini Wargaming family for all the work and content you put out. Well, you're welcome. I joined the Vault to watch all the content, but it's nearly impossible to catch up. And thank you for being a Vault member. I have some questions that I hope get answered. One, as far as I understand, you and Dave are co-founders of this company. But what kind of company do you run? Is it sole proprietorship, corporation, cooperative, etc.? It's a corporation. We're just both 50% shareholders in a corporation. Two, any plans to update the site? Mainly making it a little bit friendly on mobile devices and removing the option to buy Games Workshop merchandise. You stopped doing that a long time ago, hee hee. Yes, we're actually currently employing a web designer who is we're going to be doing incremental changes to the website this year. So hopefully we'll be improving a lot of different things. Starting off with functionality and then hopefully doing aesthetics as well. As for removing the Games Workshop stuff, the reason I didn't remove it is because they're all indexed in the search engines. So when people would search for those things, they'd find it, they'd come to our site, and then maybe they'd come over to the other part of our site. So by removing all those products, we'd be removing hundreds, if not thousands, of pages off of our website, which if you know anything about search engine optimization is not something you typically want to do after you've already had the site running for several years because of all the links that'll be there and the indexing in the search engines. Three, do you have any plans to add some written Vault content like tactics, tips, lists, and mainly modeling and painting tutorials, updating the one you have and so on? Well, you can just take a Vault from that and just talk about written content. Written content is definitely still something that we could do. It's not, like we mainly do videos. When we first started, we did both. We did both articles and videos. Back then, YouTube was still relatively new, and so the internet still focuses a lot on articles. Videos, of course, are good too. Everything has an ideal medium. And some things are better in article form. Like I love going to Bell of Lost Souls and just reading over stuff. And it's nice to be able to just quickly scan through and not have to watch a video. And so there is something to be said about the value of writing. So to answer your question, we don't have any plans, but I wouldn't say that we've said, you know, we're never going to do that. We're only ever going to do videos because it's the new technology and nobody likes writing anymore or reading. Like that's not true. It all has its value. So there's no plans, but I could see that happening eventually in the future. Thanks again and keep up the good work. You're welcome and thank you for the thank you. CR Kovar. Hi Matt, I love watching mini wargaming videos on my TV using my Chromecast, but only works for the free YouTube content. Is there any way to watch Vault content on a TV short of connecting my laptop via HDMI cable? I would love to be able to watch Vault battle reports this way. I know one person emailed me saying they used to watch Vault videos on their Apple TV because Apple TV has an app for Vimeo, but he says that that's no longer working. We never tried to make it accessible, so I haven't yet been able to find out why it doesn't work on there. Mainly, like all our videos are private, but what he would do is actually like them, and then somehow he could find them on his Vimeo account on the Vimeo app. At least it used to be that way. So there's that. There is the Vimeo app on Apple TV, which we'll be looking to make work. But currently there is no other way. But that is a technology we should probably look into. As for what Necrons sound like, the answer is obviously like the Arnold. Vault member until the aliens invade Earth. The other way that we could do it, that wouldn't be a bad idea to try to set up eventually, hopefully we can kind of include it into the list of improvements we make over the next year, is by maybe not in the next year for this one, but if we had an app for Android and for iOS and maybe even Windows or whatever makes sense to do, where they could watch the videos on their phone. Well, see, this requires an Apple TV again. I'm just thinking because I'm an iPhone user. Any video I can watch on my iPhone, I can then send it to my Apple TV. So we'll have to look into the technology, but it does make sense that we want to, as time continues, to make our videos as accessible to people as possible in all the different ways they want to watch it, because it just makes them more likely to want to stay a Vault member. So it's just good business. Rory Moody. Hi Matt, wondering if Mini Wargaming were going to refurbish their orc army. The answer is definitely yes. It's not even fully painted, there's not a lot there, and it's something that we've been looking at doing. So I know there's been certain people in the actual Mini Wargaming workforce who have expressed an interest in that, and I've also been wanting to do it as well. So, man, the sun keeps moving. It's like it's moving in the sky. I gotta keep moving back a little bit. So yes, that will eventually happen. I can't say when though. Keep up the great work. What you guys are doing influenced my life hugely to continue 40K. Vault member for life. Well, thank you. And thank you for continuing 40K. And being a Vault member too. Ukraine Konoko. Sure, we'll say that's what it is. Should Imperial Guard troops with last guns have a concentrated fire special rule? It would go as follows. It can only work if they are fired at a single model, example, vehicles or monstrous creatures. If you have 10 guard firing for every 3 that hit, you can raise the strength by 1 for 1 hit. So if you hit 6 times with 10 shots, you could either have 2 strength 4 hits or 1 strength 5 hit. I think it would go along with all the lasers combined into a big hit. Well, War Machine obviously has that mechanic with their combined range or combined melee attacks. And I do think it's a good mechanic that should be incorporated. I talked last week about, somebody asked me if I were to work on 40K, what rules I would change. And I talked about the problem with vehicles and monstrous creatures and how they kind of clash and they don't really work. And I would talk about amalgamating those. And one of the reasons is, of course, that strength 3 weapons can't hurt vehicles, but they can hurt monstrous creatures, which fluff-wise can be just as strong. Like look at Dread Knights and Riptides, right? They're just walkers. And normally if they were a walker, they'd be armor 12 or 13. 3 wouldn't touch them. But it can hurt them because they're toughness 6. So I would, that could be one way to fix it, so that you could have strength 3 weapons still be able to penetrate armor. It would be harder because they have to get a lot of hits in, but it makes sense, right? When you're firing a bunch of weak weapons, you need to get kind of some lucky hits in there. So it would represent the lucky hits, like kind of all hitting the same spot. So yes, that would be one way to do it too. Although I think that if they just fixed it so that vehicles had toughnesses and armor saves, then that would fix our problem too, because then your strength 3 weapons could wound on a 6, because you just don't go higher than toughness 6 normally, and that would represent the lucky hit in the different areas. Dave is DVD. P.S. I think Tao would listen to radio dramas, not music. Okay. Aramon 117. Hey Matt, has anyone at Mini Wargaming thought about doing 30K battle reports as another show? Nah, nobody here cares anything whatsoever about Horus Heresy.
Nice!
Yes, definitely. There's rumors that this year we're going to see Horus Heresy coming to plastic. There's also other rumors that Forge World is going to become more accessible in stores. I could see that happening. I don't see that as a far-fetched rumor. And so that happens, you could almost count on it happening. And even if that doesn't happen, I think it would happen anyways. It just makes sense, because it's been having so much success with Forge World that people are interested in it. And it is actually really cool. It's not like better rules-wise or anything like that. It's just more just really interesting lore, new models, new armies, although they're all, you know, Space Marines and Chaos, but they add a lot more variety and stuff in there. So yeah. Will 234, a popular rumor for 9th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle is Games Workshop will be introducing a new heavily armored good human army or faction. I believe it's still just a rumor, but could you share what you think the incentives and disincentives of introducing such a faction would be from a business perspective? In other words, under what circumstances might Games Workshop decide to do so? Thanks, Will. Well, I think the rumors was that it would be kind of the equivalent to a Space Marine army in fantasy, because right now they don't technically have that army in there. They have a lot of different humans, and a lot of the rumors have been going around Fantasy Battle. One is they're going to round bases, which Justin is really excited about. Another is, of course, that they're going to be amalgamizing some of the factions together into, and they've already started kind of doing that. And so it's no longer going to be the number of factions. They're going to like push them together. So, you know, all the humans would be one faction, all the elves could be a faction, all the undead could be a faction, that kind of stuff. And then I've heard the rumor as well that there would be this new Guardian faction that's kind of basically Space Marines, and even rumored that they are kind of Space Marines in fantasy. From a business perspective, making more models and making it interesting is always going to be good for business. I've always, in the past, I've kind of been down on Games Workshop for how many different armies that they have in 40K in particular, because it meant that they took forever to update them. And now they're speeding up how quickly they update them. And so that's becoming less of an issue. And so it allows that variety. Now, there's still, you know, things are still out of date, and you still have all the codex creep and things that happen, like Tyrannus come out and everybody's disappointed at how weak they are, and then Necrons come out and everybody's disappointed by how strong they are. And so there's always going to be that kind of stuff. But from a business point of view, if you can create a new faction and that has interesting rules and an interesting background, you're going to sell more models. So why not do that? As long as it makes sense for them, as long as they can keep up with their production of continuing to update the rules and models of all the other ranges. So yeah, I think new products are almost always a good idea. As long as it's not like some sort of sub-faction where you create a ton of new molds but you create the army in such a way that nobody's ever going to want to collect more than a little bit of it. Like the Harlequins, for example, this one that works fine because they only have a few models, but people aren't going to collect, most likely, 5,000, 10,000 points of Harlequins. They're going to collect 1,000, 2,000 points at most and then be done, because there's only a handful of models and a few ways to play them. And they're going to supplement more other armies, so that's fine. But if the Harlequin Codex had come out and they came out with like tons of different miniatures and ways to play them, but it's still, I don't know, it's tough to say. And for them, it's going to be a shot in the dark as well until they do it and see how successful it is. And you know that they don't always know. No company is all-knowing. They can't see the future and know whether all their ideas are good or bad. They can only look at the past and say, this has worked before, so let's try it again. But even things that have worked in the past don't always work again. We've seen that time and time again, where we do something for our business and it works really well, and we do it again and it doesn't work nearly as well. And so, yeah, there's always experimentation. So I don't know if it's a good idea to introduce the army lore-wise, because we can't know that until we see the army, but I can't see it hurting their sales. I can only see it bringing even more money in for them as they create that. Mexicant, DPS. I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer this, but do you happen to know how big the Dog Warriors kit, the ones that come with 2 Dog Warriors and 2 Dog Faces, are compared to Space Wolves Dreadnought?
Smaller.
They're definitely smaller, yeah. Yeah, definitely smaller. I have some really cool conversion ideas I want to do with them, but I can't find any information about their base size or sizes. Thanks if you can answer. Yeah, they're definitely smaller.
40 millimeter.
Yeah, they're 40 millimeter bases. Yeah, so that's the medium-sized bases rather than the large bases that Dreadnoughts are on. That doesn't mean that you can't do some conversion work. It just means that it'll be a lot of conversion work. Or you'll have to at least just stick them on a larger base so that they kind of match the footprint that a Dreadnought would have. And then maybe stick them on some rocks so they're tall, like a Dreadnought. But yeah, they're dogs, so they fit the Space Wolves, obviously. Kaios23. Hello, Matt. Thank you for everything you guys do. It's great. You're welcome. Ha ha. Right, because I was about to say thanks for saying thanks, and then your next comment was you're welcome. Very good, very clever. So to the question, in the lore of 40K, what do you think would happen to the individual factions in the universe, like the Imperium falling apart, or the Eldar being wiped out, or even the Orcs finding enough DACA? It was a question a friend of mine asked a while ago, and I was wondering what you thought. Thanks for everything. Vault member for as long as I'm able. It's hard to say because Games Workshop has set it up that everybody's kind of at a stalemate, but at the same time, everything's not a stalemate. But everything, it's just more like the momentum. There's just so many humans throughout the galaxy that would be hard to exterminate them. My theory is if I were to go through some of the armies, Orcs will never totally take over the galaxy because they just aren't organized well enough to do so. They'll always be a threat. You'll never be able to exterminate them, and they'll always be a pain. Occasionally they will threaten subsectors and do a lot of damage, but in the end they'll never be able to take over the whole galaxy. And let's face it, they don't want to. Because if they did, they'd have no enemies to fight except themselves, and that's boring. They're always looking for more enemies, and they don't want to just fight each other. They always want to fight somebody else. So they just don't have that drive to really do it. So I don't think they'll ever get there. Not that, you know, obviously this is all hypothetical. The Eldar, well, there's been, in the Harlequin Codex, there's these things, there's rumors about that there's some sort of salvation that the Eldar could have from Slaanesh. And a lot of people have been talking about that. Like, I don't know, one person I read or seen comments about the idea that they actually will get reborn into human bodies or something like that. So, something from Babylon 5. So there are rumors that the Eldar could survive. Otherwise, before the Harlequin Codex came out and there was that little snippet in there, I would have said, yeah, they're doomed. They're obviously just going to eventually die out because they just keep dying. We keep talking about how few there are, and every campaign that you see them in, whether they win or lose, they die. And so they either sacrifice themselves to win, or they lose and get wiped out. And so they're dwindling. But maybe with the new Harlequin and Segarax, whatever, that they had his plan, they'll be able to survive it and flourish afterwards. Tyranids obviously have the potential to wipe out the whole galaxy. The only thing is we don't know how big they really are. If they're way bigger than they are already in the galaxy, then let's just face it, the galaxy doesn't stand a chance because they'll just get overwhelmed. Necrons, kind of the same thing as Tyranids, that since we don't know how many tomb worlds are still not turned on, like they used to cover the entire galaxy. So they have the potential to rise up and just, especially with the new codex, and do tons of damage and just never die because the reanimation just keeps happening on a 4-up, rerolling 1s, and it's just, you just can't stop that. But since we don't know how many tomb worlds, that's just speculation. The Tau, I don't see them ever as being a dominant species. They're just kind of stuck in the corner. They're interesting, but they're actually the most, kind of the strangest race out of everything in 40K, because Games Workshop designed every race to be everywhere in the galaxy except the Tau. So the Tau only exist in the one spot, whereas every other species has a reason to be anywhere. Even Tyranids, when they were coming in the one side, now we have Leviathan coming in from the bottom, and so it really could show up anywhere. And Necrons could be anywhere, Eldar can be anywhere, Orcs, obviously anywhere, humans are everywhere. So, as for humans, for the Imperium, that all depends on what is going to happen with the Emperor. So there's been the rumors, of course, that the Golden Throne is dying, and if it were to die, that would snuff out the Astronomicon, which of course would spell a kind of another dark ages, as if it's not already dark, but even darker ages for the Imperium as they all get cut off from each other, and just like what happened before. But then, what happens when the Emperor, the Golden Throne, finally dies, could determine that as well. Like, for example, there's a thought, there's the I can't remember the name of the faction whose job it is to gather up all the Emperor's descendants. The Sensei, I think. The Sensei? Yeah. Yeah, and basically their job is they're trying to get ready for when the Golden Throne falls, because then what they do is they would then sacrifice all of his descendants, because there's like a piece of him in each of them, so that they could, all that psychic stuff, all the bits of his soul would then be able to coalesce and then be reborn, and so the Emperor could be reborn. That would be really cool to see the Emperor come back. I really hope they do that. And then all of a sudden if the Emperor is back, then there's the chance for humanity again for another golden age, and he could go kick all the different Space Marine factions in the teeth for being heretics, essentially, because they gave up what his vision actually was for all the darkness that they have instead. But the big problem though is chaos. The problem with chaos is the more you fight it, the stronger it gets, because like Khorne likes fighting. So as long as people die, Khorne is happy, even if it's his own guys. Like if he spills a bunch of demons into a world and everybody slaughters everybody and nobody's alive at the end, Khorne's happy, and so that's increased it. So you almost, in order for chaos really to be snuffed out of the galaxy, you have to destroy everything with a soul. So the Necrons or the Tyranids need to wipe everybody out. And so that's the only real way for chaos no longer to be a threat. So I don't think chaos will ever go away because of that. Hopefully, like the Eldar will have learned from their lesson that they don't want to go to such excesses as to create new chaos gods, and kind of find some sort of balance where there's a balance of dealing with everything so that chaos still exists. There's that shadow of everybody's emotions in the warp without it being a huge threat to actually enveloping the whole galaxy. Now, if the other way that chaos could lose is if chaos won, which sounds counterintuitive, but if they all of a sudden were able to totally materialize in the real space, they would kill everybody. That's what they would do. And then there wouldn't be any souls. And so then chaos would disappear. It's kind of like Slaanesh. When Slaanesh was born, it created this huge kind of explosion in the warp as Slaanesh was born, which created the Eye of Terror and killed most of the Eldar race, but it also kind of calmed the warp, because the warp was like boiling up, boiling up, boiling up, exploded. It's kind of like throwing dynamite into a fire. It actually puts the fire out mostly. It, you know, blows up everything else around it, but still puts out the fire. So that actually created this period of calmness, and that's when humanity and the Emperor were able to then go out and conquer the galaxy. But now humanity's kind of doing the same thing that the Eldar did, not in the sense of, you know, being perfect and knowing everything and then living these lives of excess, but just kind of feeding chaos with the way their society is. So, have I missed anybody? Like Dark Eldar gets lumped into Eldar for the fate of that. And I think that's everybody. So who knows? And of course, once again, it's a fictional universe, and so really it's just whatever the writers decide will happen, for whatever reason they decide to make it happen. Especially with 40K science, or not science, they can really do whatever they want, and it'll work. All right. Primarch Alex. Matt, hey, you're awesome. Thank you. As is Mini Wargaming. Longtime fan. What do you think of the new 40K console game Space Hulk Deathwing? I'm afraid that this will go mainstream and therefore will create a large influx of console gamers into the 40K universe. Do you think 40K needs this type of audience? I believe not. Sure they do. Why would you want to turn down more players? More players means more money in the wargaming market, which then means more war games, more models, more miniatures, more games. And it's just, the larger the market gets, the better it is for a consumer. The smaller the market, the worse it is for a consumer, because it's harder to find things are more expensive. But if we could all, if wargaming went mainstream, which it never will, because just of the nature of what it is, you'd see a lot of you'd see a lot more variety in games. You'd have access to more gamers. There'd be more stores. They'd be closer to you. Prices would actually go down. I'm not saying Games Workshop prices would go down, but the overall price of miniatures would go down because there'd be way more competition, and that's just a natural evolution of a market. And so it becomes more of a consumer's market, and because they have more choice, more control, and that's good for consumers. So, and of course we can label people as console players, but let's face it, like I play computer games and I play miniature war games. Like I'm both. So you can't define like the group of console gamers. And if it gets them into it, then that's great. I think what will happen if it does get really popular is it'll find people who would be interested in miniature wargaming and get them into it. Hat Matter. Hey Matt, I remember you mentioned that you're a fan of Stargate SG-1. Would you ever play a minis game based on Stargate, or maybe an XCOM-esque PC game based on Stargate? Sure. Yeah, if it was fun. A lot of times, there's two things that can really add to the enjoyment of a miniatures game. One could be the universe, and the other one could be the rules. And they can, for example, you have like Star Wars X-Wing, which has the universe of Star Wars that kind of draws people into it, and the rules are actually really good too. And then you have games like Lord of the Rings that Games Workshop puts out. That I got into that game not because of the rules. The rules, they're okay, they're fine, but they're nothing special. It's just a skirmish game, and it's interesting. It's a good game. But what drew me in was the universe, because I loved Lord of the Rings, and so if it's as long as you have a good enough gaming system, then the universe can draw you in. Or vice versa. If you have a spectacular gaming system, then despite the universe, it could still be fun. Although I still think I would lean more towards the universe being more important than the game, just because that's what will really keep people around. Evans Necrons, regarding a comment about Chromecast, using an app called Allcast will allow you to watch all the battle reports via Chromecast, even fault vids. My question is this: do you think Games Workshop might release an FAQ or amendment for Necrons allowing the Catan to target a unit after selecting its random power? The nerf on Catan seems too much and renders them somewhat useless. I hope they will, but I don't think they will. Just because something is totally awful doesn't mean they're going to FAQ it or errata it. Because the rule is clear. So it wouldn't be an FAQ, it would have to be an errata. Because the rule specifically says choose your target, then choose your power. Like there's no ambiguity there. If there was, we would have already house ruled it that you get to choose your power first, because it's just so utterly awful. But that's not the case. So they'd have to actually errata it, which means that they would go back and change it. But I don't think they will. They haven't been putting out a lot of FAQs and erratas. Not quite sure why they've been leaning away from that. Maybe because they've been so busy just kind of keeping up with making their updates. but I wish they would put out more FAQs and erratas. P.S. Work on a custom monolith for your army is nearly complete. Ooh. Battle station almost online. Axis 762. Just got 15 more minutes. Matt, the idea of Nurgle Tyranid sounds awesome. After reading about the Dorian heresy, I was wondering what your thoughts on Nurgle Blood Angels, Khorne Space Wolves, Slaanesh White Scars, and Tzeentch Raven Guard. If Games Workshop would anoint it as canon, I think they could sell a model or two. Well, theoretically, you could have anybody fall to any of the Chaos Gods. Like, look at all the Chaos Space Marines we have. Most of them were chapters that got divided. That you have a chapter, and some of them stayed loyal, and some of them didn't. And sometimes the loyal ones changed their name to a new chapter, and sometimes it was the other ones that changed their name to a new chapter. And so that did happen. So it's not crazy to think that some Blood Angels could fall to Nurgle, although Blood Angels would probably more likely fall to Khorne, that kind of stuff. But yeah, you could totally have that. Now, model-wise, having that, I don't know. I don't know how Games Workshop would fit all that in. They'd have to have supplements or whatever. So I don't know if it would be necessary as a business move, but fluff-wise, it could definitely be canon. Also, as with the closing of the Mini Wargaming store a few years ago, people can no longer challenge you for a gift certificate to your store. Here's an idea. They could challenge you for a gift certificate to a local restaurant for some poutine. You can even change the title page to have you holding a platter of poutine and wearing a white chef's hat. Great idea. Keep up the great work, and the narrative campaign's coming. Matu95. Hi Matt, me and a friend have a Citadel Realm of Game board from Games Workshop. We want to make it into a desert board, but don't know where to start. Any suggestions? Paint it to look like sand? That's the only suggestion I can think of. Aren't they just... Could you just paint it to look like sand? The Citadel Realm of Battle board from Games Workshop. Yeah, they're just those 2x2 boards with a hill. Or not. But I don't see why you couldn't just paint it to look like sand instead of like dirt. So there you go. Paint it look like sand, and you got your desert. Kindle Smith. Why Malifaux is better. You pick your faction, but you pick your units after the terrain is placed, the deployment zones are determined, and the game objectives have been determined. I can see that being better. I could also make it take longer, because you can't prepare your list beforehand. Unless you can at least prepare the scenario and objectives beforehand, and then the terrain gets set up afterwards. 40k, you are sitting duck to luck, and general games revolve around killing one another over objectives. Gotta love getting to kill the enemy aircraft objective when the enemy doesn't have any, or getting a simple victory point because an objective is in close to the deployment zone. You know what? I love Maelstrom. I find that more often than not, they create a much more tactical game than the other missions that Games Workshop has put out. Yeah, sometimes you draw cards. Well, we have a house rule that if you draw a card that's impossible, like you draw the kill a flyer or flying monsters creature and your opponent doesn't have any, we actually have a house rule that you throw that one out and draw another one. So that problem is not there, at least for us. But what we do, and I think the way 40k should be played, is when I set up a game with an opponent, we talk about what we're going to do. Beforehand, we say, well, what scenario do you want to play? So we actually know that usually, if we care, we know the scenario before we build the list. And we know our opponents before we build the list. And if we're going to do anything crazy, like I'm going to bring 4 flyers, or I'm going to bring all the vehicles, then we tell the opponent that so that they can create accordingly. So I think 40k could be played that way too. Now, 40k is not balanced, and it can't be played super competitively because of that. Sure, you could play any game competitively if you really wanted to. You could play totally unbalanced games competitively, and the meta will develop that everybody kind of plays the same 2 or 3 lists like we see at tournaments. But I mean, like, to me, a competitive war game is where you can choose almost anything throughout it and play it competitively. So I think of War Machine, for example, where, as far as I understand, there's not like one faction who always wins. Or one list that always wins. That there's enough variety in what can win a tournament. I guess that is it right there. If you were to look at all the tournaments around the world playing that game, if you're seeing the majority, if you're seeing these high percentages of certain lists, not even certain armies, but certain lists winning most of those tournaments, to me that signals a weakness in the game's competitive nature. Whereas if you have a game and you're seeing a good variety of things winning tournaments, and obviously there's always going to be certain armies winning more because people like to copy things that they see other people doing, and so you're going to have some more popular than others. But if you see a good variety of what's winning, that to me signals that it's a good competitive game. And 40K definitely is not in that category. It just isn't. It just is not. Not whatsoever. Where was I? Okay, gotta love getting the... Oh yeah, you already talked about that. So yeah, so you're right. There's other games way more competitive than 40K, but that doesn't necessarily make them better games. That just makes them more competitive games. Like, you can play them more competitively. And some people like that more. I personally like the fluff and the feel of a 40K game. Like, I find that other games that I've played, which I enjoy, I've enjoyed War Machine, I've enjoyed Fantasy, I've enjoyed Infinity, I've enjoyed X-Wing, I've enjoyed Lord of the Rings, I've enjoyed all these games, but the one thing that I found that 40K has that nobody else seems to have is the ability to drop a ton of models on the table and feel like you're having a big engagement. And it kind of is more of a loose game. Like, you don't have to, every millimeter doesn't count quite as much as in some of those other games. And some people don't like that, and some people do, and I happen to do like that. King Log 100. Hey Matt, quick question here. I'm thinking about a Tau tournament list with Necron allies, and I found myself wondering if I could take the Necron Decurion detachment as allies with Tau. I looked through the rules, and they have only confused me more. Thanks for all that you do, Vault Member for Life. You can take whatever you want. And I'm not even talking about Unbound. And a Battleforge list is a list completely composed of detachments and formations. That's it. The allies rule will tell you how those models interact on the table. So if they're allies of convenience, or if they're battle brothers, then they can go on each other's transports, they can cast blessings on each other, independent characters can join. If they're allies of convenience, and they just basically can't work together, but other than that, they don't give any disadvantages. And if they're, of course, if they're desperate allies or Company Apocalypse, you have some disadvantages for having them on the table together as well. So yeah, you could have a Necron Decurion detachment with a Tau Allied detachment, or Combined Arms detachment, or a Farsight Enclave detachment, or a formation from the Tau Cadre Firebase support team, and that would be a Battleforge list. And you just have to choose which one's your primary detachment, because the Warlord is inside the primary detachment, and that's really all there is to it. And yeah, that works. But once they're on the table, you have to remember how they interact as allies. So I could create a list that has a Tyranid formation, a Space Marine detachment, a Tau formation, a Sisters of Battle formation, and something else, whatever. And that would be a Battleforge list. When I put them on the table together, they'll have a hard time interacting, of course, because a lot of them will have ally problems, but it is totally correct to do. So it's changed a lot. 6th edition to 7th edition changed enormously how you build lists, especially as more supplements and codexes have come out and provide even more detachments and more formations to choose from. It used to be that what's now called the Combined Arms detachment was your primary detachment before, and they even talked about taking multiple primary detachments, and then there was the Allied detachment as well, but that was something different. And that was basically it. That was your choices. And then they started coming out with formations, but then 7th edition came out and basically said, you know, basically there's a ton of different ways to build your list. Unless you're Harlequins. Then there's only like 2. Q, Mr. the Q. I have had this question for a long time, and it is a business question, so you must love this. Do you have an agreement with Games Workshop about IP? I was wondering, as one of your videos, especially the Codex reviews, you pretty much read off the stats of the units. Sometimes something I know Games Workshop is very adamant at protecting. No, we do not have an agreement. Everything we do falls under fair use, which is this wonderful gray area of the copyright law that everybody's uneasy about. Both the people who create the videos and the people who have the IP. Because basically fair use allows you to use other people's IP to a certain extent. What extent? Well, it depends on what the judge decides to rule. So, because really anything could be argued and anything can be taken to court, and really it's just kind of up to the companies to decide what they need to protect, how far they, because a company needs to protect its IP, because if it doesn't, then when it decides to protect it later on, because it needs to, because it's actually something might come out like Chapter House that actually comes out that could hurt their bottom line, rather than things that we do, which obviously don't hurt their bottom line, it helps their bottom line. But when things like that come out, if they go to court and then the judge says, well, here's a dozen, and you know that the Chapter House lawyers would bring this forth, or whoever else, here's a dozen other people who've been doing this for 10 years and you haven't done anything about it, So why all of a sudden are you interested? And the judge could actually rule against them because of that. So that's why companies have to aggressively guard their IP, even against things that might not seem to cost them money, is because of the precedent it sets for the future. But what we do falls under fair use. And so they'd have a hard time winning any court cases. And obviously for PR's sake, I think it would be a bad idea for them to try to do anything like that. So, not that they haven't done it in the past, but so far, everything I've seen, and I know some people might not like me saying this, so far, everything I've seen Games Workshop do to protect their IP, I haven't disagreed with. I can't think of anything they've done, except for that one Space Marine book that was on Amazon, and had nothing to do with anything to do with Space Marines, and that got like a cease and desist. That was probably just like one of those, the lawyers are just going through and finding stuff, sending out cease and desist, and that one was a little overboard. But other than that, everything I've seen them do, and you could probably name off a lot of things. You're like, well, what about this one? What about this one? And I can tell you more of the story than most people would hear, not because I have any ins, but because I actually will look into it. Like something happens and people are like, oh, I can't believe they did that. But then you find out that it's actually an overreaction on the part of the person receiving the cease and desist, or whatever, or misunderstandings. So I so far haven't seen them do anything that I wouldn't agree with, which I can't say for other companies that have tried to protect their IP. Even the German film, good example, the German film that years ago was coming out, and all of a sudden Games Workshop basically shut it down, and everybody's like, why would you stop a fan film? Well, in Germany, if they didn't, then their IP would be forfeit. That's the German laws. And their IP would be so forfeit that people in Germany could create Games Workshop miniatures and sell them internationally. And they could just do that. They could just create them. They could totally just copy them, because essentially Games Workshop has said, we don't care about our IP, so everybody can use it. So what seems to most people like this stupid thing, why would this company go after a fan film? It's a fan film. Like, it's not going to hurt them, it'll help them. It's because there's a lot of things about laws that the majority of people don't understand, and that especially with IP, copyright and trademark laws are convoluted, they're annoying, and for the most part, they cause more problems than they help. But they're there to try to protect people's interests, so that, because if somebody else could just all of a sudden make Games Workshop miniatures, then it would cause problems. And I'm talking like beyond the Chinese knockoffs. I'm like talking like an American company all of a sudden creates the manufacturing capabilities to do it. And that would just be bad for everybody. So I'm not worried about it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. All right, let's do one more. As you can tell, my nose is a little stuffed up, so I need to stop and get a drink of water. Vash 1016. Hey Matt, just wondering if it is at all helpful to post rules errors in the comment sections anymore. I know at one time you guys would check out your own videos and see what you got wrong, but with the schedule being full for a month out, do you even remember the battle reports when they came out? It kind of feels like beating a dead horse when an opponent comes in, you film a few battle reports, and they or you guys make the same mistakes in every bat rep filmed in that series. Obviously, you can't change the reps after they are filmed, so is it just a waste of time and energy as it appears many wargaming no longer goes back and reviews the bat rep comments? We do still look at them and get those errors. Like for example, but you're also right that you have to consider how often you bring up those rules mistakes. For example, yesterday, our new campaign just went out, and people pointed out a few rules mistakes that we got wrong. Well, we've already filmed the first 5 parts, and so some of those rules might get propagated, although a lot of them that you pointed out, some of those we caught ourselves, but if we might not have caught it till part 2. And so if in mission 1 you're like, oh, you guys are still doing this, or whatever, if later ones, you're still doing this one wrong, you're still doing this wrong, don't you read these comments, you're still doing this wrong, that's obviously counterproductive. But I still appreciate if people post rules that we got wrong, or at least, or rules that you think we got wrong, because sometimes people get it wrong, thinking that we got it wrong. Because we do read them. I do still read the comments, and other people still read the comments as well. So for sure, still post rules mistakes. I would quickly scan through the comments to see if somebody else already posted it, because sometimes what happens is we get something wrong, and there's like 30 comments all saying you got this rule wrong. What I find more useful instead is if somebody posts a rule that we got wrong and you agree, then thumb it up. If you disagree, like you think, no, that's not actually wrong, then you thumb it down, because then so other people will see. Because what also happens is other people read the comments and they might think, oh, yeah, that rule must be wrong then. But if there's 20 thumb downs on that comment, then they know, okay, everybody disagrees with that person. Because sometimes people do get it wrong. Like they're like, oh, the Riptide has feel no pain. But it doesn't always. Well, I think maybe in that one it did, but it's not an automatic thing, or talking about certain things I've seen that people do get wrong, and other ones we definitely did get wrong. So it is still useful. Obviously, we're not going to be as agile to be able to catch them and change things, but that'll still help us to get things right in the future as well. Okay, we're going to end it there. Thank you very much for all your comments and questions. And of course, if you want yours answered in next week's show, make sure you leave a comment in the section below. Thanks for watching, and happy wargaming.